Hello everyone, I hope you all are doing fine. And guess what? Today we're going to talk about evaluation system. And you know what? This is the last section of Unit 1 teaching aptitude, right? So I hope you all are excited. Well, why you should be excited? Because at least one question always come in net from this particular section. So in that perspective, it's quite important session that you should pay more attention, right? So imagine a school as a big creative workshop. So the main goal is to make sure everyone in it, students, teachers, you name it, is kind of growing, learning new things, and basically just getting better at what they do. It's like being part of a team where everyone's pushing each other to level up, right? So now schools have this thing called an evaluation system. It's a kind of like progress check. Like when you're playing a video game and you hit a checkpoint, right? It helps to see how far you have come, right? What you have learned and what you might need to work on. So the teachers and the folks running a school use these kind of check-ins for a bunch of reasons, right? For starters, they want to make sure they are doing a good job. It's like if you're teaching someone to cook, you'd want to know if they can actually make a decent meal without setting the kitchen on fire, right? So think of it this way: at the end of the school year or semester, teachers will check out how much you have learned. This isn't just about throwing a test your way and calling it a day. They are looking at the big picture, how you're doing as an individual, how you kind of get with your classmate in group project, or how you're tackling the course overall. It's about getting a full 360 views, right? And here's where it gets real, right? These evaluation aren't just about filling out a bunch of forms or ticking boxes, right? Teachers are like detective, using clues from tests, project, and even just watching how students tackle problems to figure out what's clicking and what's not. For example, if most of the class is struggling with math, it might be time to try a new way of teaching it, right? Like bringing in more hands-on activities or using real life examples like budgeting for a school event, or to make abstract concepts more relatable, right? So the whole point of this evaluation business is to make sure learning isn't just about memorizing stuff for a test, but actually understanding and applying it in the real world. It's about making sure that when you leave school, right, you're not just loaded with facts, but you have got skills you can use, whether that's solving problems, working with others, or just knowing how to learn new things, right? Now let me tell you about the features of evaluation system. First off, think of evaluation as this never-ending journey we are all on, right? And for example, you can take your NET exam also, right? It's a kind of evaluation, right? And I'll tell you more about it. Right. So it's not just about sitting down for an exam and calling it a day. It's more like a road trip where you're constantly checking the map, right? Or the teaching methods, adjusting the route, kind of the learning process, and making sure everyone enjoying the ride, kind of the overall growth in students. Right. Imagine your teacher not just asking you to write essay, but checking out how you're growing as a person, how you interact with your friends, and even how you handle your emotions. Right. It's all about the big picture, covering everything from your smarts to your heart. Right. Then there is the school social aspects of evaluations as well, right? It's like being a part of a big buzzing community where everyone's learning from each other. The tests and quizzes are designed not just to see if you're memorizing the textbook, but to make sure you're growing up to be a well-rounded person who gets the vibes of the society around you. Think of it as a group project where everyone's input shapes the outcome. Evaluation are super comprehensive too, right? It's like they have the giant net that catches everything, not just the facts you can cram the night before a test, but also you think, you feel, and interact with the world around you. Now onto the heart of it, it's all about you, the student, right? Evaluations focus kind of more on how you're picking up new skills and knowledge rather than just drilling you with the information, right? It's like when you're learning to ride a bike, the important thing isn't just reading about how to do it, but actually getting on the bike and pedaling it, right? They're also like your personal growth diary, right? Descriptive and detailed, highlighting your journey through the learning landscape. Imagine getting a report card that doesn't just have grades but also tells you where you're shining and where you could use a little bit polish or help, right? And when things don't go as planned, evaluations step in like a friendly guide, offering advice on how to get back on track, right? It's not about pointing fingers but helping you find your way again, right? So this whole process is a team effort, right, involving not just you and your teacher but also your family and friends. Think of it as a building a Lego set together where everyone's contributions matters, right? And it's about gathering insights from all corners to get a full picture of your progress, right? So evaluation also give a thumbs up or thumbs down to teaching methods too, right? It's a reality check for how effective the lessons are, kind of like checking the reviews before you try out a new restaurant, right? It's pretty standard for kids to go through evaluation to make sure they're growing up healthy, both in mind and body. It's like those regular checkups at the doctor, but especially for your brain and personality. So the focus is on the total you, not just the brain on legs, but a living, breathing, feeling or person with dreams, fears and everything in between, right? And finally, evaluation are kind of, decisive moments, sort of like those crossroads where you decide which path to take next, right? They help figure out what's working, what's not, and how to make learning even more awesome for you, right? So imagine you're working on a group project to build the coolest kind of cardboard castle. So the evaluation would look at how well you guys planned, right, and divided the work, solved problems, and finally how cool your castle turned out. Right. It's not just about the final product, but about how you got there, how much you learned, and how you worked together. Right. And let me tell you about the functions of evaluation. So evaluation, it's like the trusty GPS in your car. It's a main gig, right? To help teachers spot and understand any hiccups in the learning journey, both big and small. Think of it this way. When a teacher nails down how to effectively evaluate, it's like they have got a magic wand to cut down any student problems by half, right? Now onto this term remedial work, and kind of sounds fancy, right? But it's essentially the fix it plan after figuring out what the glitch is, right? So imagine a coach watching a replay to see where the team's plays went off track, right? Then running drills to patch those gaps. That's what teachers do, right? They find the best way to tweak learning so students can evolve not just academically but as people too, right? And why do we even bother with evaluation? You might be wondering, right? To get the blueprint of education crystal clear. So the end game of learning is to morph behavior to ignite change within, right? Through evaluations, teachers can literally see the light bulb moment happening where a student goes from, I don't understand. Then, oh, now I understand, right? So, but here's the catch. A teacher's got to have the right tools in their kit to guide effectively. It's like being a wilderness guide without a map if they don't, right? Proper evaluations light up the path, showing all the twists and turns of a student's ability, passions, smarts, and what makes them tick, right? And using these insights, a teacher can then play a matchmaker, right? Connecting each student with their best path forward. It's a bit like sorting hats in a magical school, but for real life, figuring out who shines where and guiding them accordingly. Plus, this whole evaluation business, it's a two-way street, right? It doesn't just help a student to grow, it also a mirror for teachers to see their own reflection, right? To fine tune their teaching superpowers. Ultimately, it's about making the whole learning journey smoother and more effective for everyone involved, right? Now, another important thing to consider is the elements of evaluation. So, what are the elements in evaluation? So, first is evaluator and institute. Think of it this way. To keep things fair and square, the folks who check how well a program or a school is doing should not be the same people running the show, right? It's like having an unbiased referee in a soccer team. Imagine a school where a separate team, not the teachers or the principal, takes care of checking how well the school is doing. They report to the big bosses or maybe even a board that looks after the schools or programs quality, right? For students, it's about looking at the whole package: classes, library, tech stuff, even how good the sports facilities and the cafeteria food are, right? It's about the entire ride from day one to graduation. Then we have audience and participants. When we are trying to figure out who we are teaching or providing services to, it's a bit like being a detective. We gather clues, which is data, right, about who our audience is. This could mean sending out a quick survey before a workshop to get to know the folks who will be attending, right? Or in a classroom setting, it might involve understanding how students influence each other and contribute to the learning environment, right? Think of a teacher using a quick poll in the first class to understand who's sitting in the room, right? Then we have purpose, objective, or aim, right? And this is about being super clear on what we are trying to achieve. Let's say a teacher sets the scene at the beginning of the semester by laying out what students should know or be able to do by the end, right? It's all about making sure everyone knows the destination before the journey starts, right? It's like your syllabus, right? It's like going on a trip and knowing the landmark you want to hit along the way. Then we have like data collection, right? So gathering data can be a mix of counting things like qualitative and quantitative, right? And imagine you're trying to understand if a new teaching method is working. You might count how many students improved their grades, which is quantitative, and also ask them how they feel about the class now, which is qualitative, right? It's like collecting both the stats and the stories behind a game to see the full picture. Then we have data analysis. So once we have all this information, we got to make sense of it, right? If we have got numbers, we might use the stats to see if there are any trends. For the stories and opinions, it's about finding common themes or differences. Think of it as watching a movie, then discussing with friends what the main messages were and how different scenes connected to those. Then another important element is rubric and grading, right? So rubrics are like the rule book for grading. They help teachers be fair by clearly stating what counts as good work, whether it's for a paper or a project or a presentation, right? There are different kinds, but the idea is to make grading less of a mystery. So grading then is all about giving feedback, right? It's not just about putting a letter on a paper, but helping you see where you rocked it and where you can grow, right? So imagine you're learning to bake. So a rubric would outline what makes a perfect cake, like flavor, texture, appearance, right? And grading would be the feedback on how your baking attempts, right, and helping you improve your recipe next time. So by making everything more relatable, digging into the everyday experience, we can see how these elements play out in real life, right, making the abstracts more tangible and easier to get. Now we are going to jump into one of the important thing in evaluation, which is the types of evaluation, and the question always comes from this. So let's talk about formative evaluation. So imagine you're learning to cook. Formative evaluation is like having a buddy who tastes your dish at every step and says, hey, maybe add a little bit more of a salt or sugar, right? Or sometimes he says like, this is perfect, just like that, right? It's all about getting that real-time feedback to make your dish, right? So the learning process and then taste better. Right, so back in 1967, Michael Scriven was like, let's call this process formative and summative evaluation. Right, so formative is this cool supportive friend in your learning journey. It's not about grading or judging, it's about guiding and helping. Think of it as those moments in class when the teacher says, let's see where we are at this, right? And then he'd start doing that quizzes and all this stuff, right? And it's about figuring out what you're ace at and where you might need a little bit extra help, right? So teachers also get to play detective, spotting kind of where the class might be hitting a snag and figuring out how to fix it pronto, right? And because there are no grades on the line, it's all very chill and low pressure, right? Then effective feedback is the name of the game, right? It's crucial for students to know what they are doing well and what they could do better. And it's not just a one-way street. Students get to throw their thoughts into the mix, making it a team effort in steering the learning ship, right? Let's talk about the example. Most of you know what quiz is, right? So quiz is to see how well you understand a lesson, or maybe participated in a class discussion where you got to bounce ideas of your classmates and teacher, right? So these are prime example of formative assessment. They are like those regular check-ins with the coach who says, here's that's working, right? And here's what you can improve, right? The beauty of formative assessment is its flexibility and focus on growth. It's all about those mid-semester heart to heart kind of, or a small group sessions where everyone's open up, about how the course is going and what can be improved, right? Now, why bother with all this? So for starters, it helps teachers get the lay of the land, right? Understanding what everyone's good at and where the class as a whole might need kind of, improvement. It's like customizing the learning journey so everyone gets the most of it. So students get to set their personal goals based on real feedback, making the whole learning process more engaging and personal, right? So think of it this way. Learning becomes a journey where you're in the driver's seat with your teacher as the trusty navigator. It's not just about the destination, which is the grade. It's about the road there, right? Filled with self-discovery, self-assessment, and setting those personal milestones. So remember those tests, quizzes, discussion, and your homework, right? So these are formative, right? It doesn't count, in a grades or anything. It's just these kind of, everyday activity in your classroom. And next, let me tell you about summative evaluation, which is completely opposite of formative, because think of summative evaluation like the season finale of your favorite TV show. It's the big event at the end of academic year where everything you have learned is put to the test, right? So like your final exam. Right. This isn't just a quick quiz to see how you're doing along the way, but it's the grand assessment that looks at what you have achieved over the entire program or academic year, right? Imagine you have been learning to play the guitar all year and now it's time to perform at the school concert in front of everyone. That's performance, right? That's your summative assessment. So at the end of each course or subject, there is this big evaluation to see if the program's goals were met and if you're really changed or grown from the experience. Did you pass the exam or not, right? Summative assessments are the real deal actually. They usually have a lot of points on the line and can include everything from midterm, final project to see, like big end of the year exam. For example, let's say you're taking a cooking class. So the summative assessment could be planning and cooking a full 3-course meal by yourself. It's all about showing off the skills you have developed, not just learning new one, right? So these assessments are graded and often determine your final mark of the course, like if you pass the exam or not. So your final exam, like when students are in their 10th standard, so all in between there are some small tests and all these stuff, right? These are formative, but the final exam, that is your summative evaluation, right? So I hope you understand this particular term. Now let me tell you about the diagnostic evaluation. They ask question based on that. So in that perspective, this particular evaluation becomes more important, right? Let me tell you about it. Imagine you're about to start learning how to build a website, but before you dive into the coding and design, your teacher gives you a little quiz to see what you already know about computers, the internet, right? And maybe a bit of HTML. So this is diagnostic evaluation. It's like the pre-game show, helping the teacher figure out where everyone's starting from, right? So diagnostic evaluation is super handy because they clue in the teachers on what the class already knows and what they need to learn, right? It's like if you are planning a road trip, you'd need to know your starting point before you can map out how to get to your destination, right? So these evaluations can, help before the course starts or even during, especially if there is a need to adjust the teaching plan on the fly, right? Let's say you're in a math class, right? And the teacher drops a quick quiz to see how good everyone is at algebra before starting the unit, right? That quiz, a diagnostic tool, helping the teacher decide if they need to review some basics or if they can jump straight into the more complex stuff, right? So by using these evaluations, teachers can tailor their lessons more effectively, ensuring everyone gets the support they need to succeed, right? It's all about making learning as efficient and enjoyable as possible, kind of like choosing the right difficulty level in a video game. Let's talk about prognostic evaluation, right? Imagine you're trying to figure out how well you're going to do in your career. That's where prognostic evaluation steps in, right? It's like taking a look at all the stuff you have learned, how you have done in your classes or training, and then making kind of, an educated guess about how you're going to perform in the future. It's a bit like weather forecasting, but for your career. For instance, let's say you're really good at solving puzzles and have aced all your maths tests. A prognostic evaluation might predict you're going to be a kind of whiz in a career that needs problem solving skills like engineering or programming. And here's a fun example. Think about your health, right? Doctor use things like your blood pressure and cholesterol levels as clues to figure out your health forecast. If those numbers are higher than the chill zone, it might be a heads up that you need to kind of tweak your lifestyle to avoid trouble down the road, right? Okay guys, let me tell you about another important evaluation, which is norm referenced evaluation. You know why this is important? Because in the past like few years they have been keep asking question based on that. So in that perspective, this particular evaluation is the most important thing that you have to pay attention, right? So let me tell you about that norm referenced evaluation, right? So imagine you have just taken a test, and rather than seeing how well you did based on every single questions, you're actually more interested in how you kind of did well against your classmates. So it's like a comparison, right? So that's what we call a norm reference test, NRT, right? So NRTs are all about comparison. Remember that keyword, right? So let's say you're in a class where everyone is asked to run a mile. So instead of saying you need to run this mile in under 10 minutes to pass, an NRT approach would be like, let's see how fast everyone runs, and then we rank everyone from fastest to slowest. So in that comparison, you can just understand what norm referenced is, right? So if you're faster than most of your classmates, you are considered to be doing pretty well, even if you didn't hit that 10-minute mark, right? So here's how it plays out in real life, right? Imagine you and your friends take a quiz on your favorite TV show. So afterward, you don't just see who got the most answers right, but you also see who's the ultimate fan based on how everyone scored compared to each other, right? So that's NRT in nutshell, right? So now let's dive into the grading part, right? Which can a kind of bit tricky, right? Ever heard of grading on a curve? It's term that comes up a lot in schools and universities, right? Basically, it's a fancy way of adjusting everyone's score to fit a certain pattern, right? Usually make sure that a set number of students get A's, B's and C and so on, regardless of how high or low the overall scores were, right? It's like saying we want the top 20% of you to get A's and the next 30% to get B's and so on. So even if the highest score on the test was a 60 out of 100, that could still be a kind of A grade, because if it's at the top of the curve, right? And here's a real life example to paint the picture, right? Imagine you're playing a video game with friends and you decide that the person with the highest scores gets a prize, but then you also give out smaller prizes based on how close everyone else scores were to the top score, right? That's sort of what's happening with norm referenced grading. So in school, this system has its fans and critics also. Some say it's fairer because it adjusts for the difficulty of a test or the ability to level of the class. Others argue it can be harsh, especially if you're stuck in a class full of geniuses, making it harder to shine, right? Imagine, take an example of your NET exam, right? Like the passing mark criteria that they have fixed, like 40% in paper 1 and like 50 or 40% in paper 2, right? But what happens, this criteria doesn't follow. They give only NET or JRF for the certain amount. They fix the rate, like okay, all of them are qualified that much, students or aspirants will only give like 7% of the GRF or the 10% of net, all these stuff, right? So these criteria are norm reference. So every time you give your net exam, it's a norm referenced evaluation. So I hope you get the point, right? So on the other hand, we have criterion referenced evaluation, which is very simple. They set a criteria like you have to get 40 marks to pass the exam or 60 marks to pass the exam. So that's simple. They have just fixed one reference point, right? So that's your criterion reference evaluation. Imagine you're learning something new, right? Say how to bake a cake or maybe how to ride a bike. They're not going to compare your cake to Gordon Ramsay's masterpiece, right? Or see if you can cycle faster than Lance Armstrong. So think of it like playing a video game. You're on a mission, and to beat the level, you need to collect 100 coins. It doesn't matter if your friends collected 150 coins. As long as you hit that 100 mark, you're golden, right? Exactly like the exam. So that's the essence of these tests. You're judged against a set standard, not against other players or students score, right? So let's break it down with some everyday example, right? Remember the driving test you took to get your license? That's a classic criterion reference test. So the goal isn't to be the next Formula 1 star, but to prove you won't be a menace on the road, right? You need to show you can signal, merge, and also park correctly. If you tick all these boxes, congrats, you have got your license, right? So it doesn't matter if the person before you did a perfect parallel park on the first try and you took 3. You both passed because you met the criteria, right? Or consider when you were in school and your teacher gave you a math test. So the aim was to see if you understood the chapter on, say, algebra, right? Not whether you're kind of Einstein, right? If the passing score was 60 out of 100 and you nailed exactly 60, you are passed. It's not about beating classmates, but about meeting the expected standards. So in the grand scheme of things, these tests are everywhere, not just in schools, but in life. So why do we care about criterion reference test? Because they are fair, right? They say here's the bar, you can reach it. And if you can, you're set, you're passed, right? It's all about ensuring everyone has the skills or knowledge they're supposed to have, whether it's baking a decent cake, riding a bike without accidents, or driving safely on the road. Right. Now let me tell you about the Ipsative assessment. So this one is all about competing against yourself rather than getting compared to everyone else, right? It's like if you ran a race yesterday and then ran it faster today, you'd say you have improved based on your own past experience, right? So not because you beat someone else, right? For a real life scenario, imagine you're on a diet, right? Instead of obsessing over how you stack up to those Instagram fitness models, you focus on your own journey, right? So if you weighed like 200 pounds last month and this month you are at 195, that's a kind of progress, right? So it's all about personal best, right? So not how you measure up to the rest of the world. So this approach is super encouraging because it's like playing a video game where you're trying to beat your high score. For example, choosing between 2 snacks you love but picking the healthier option because last time you chose the other one and want to make a better choice this time around, right? So it's all about those small wins and personal growth. So I hope you understand this, right? Now let me tell you about the quantitative evaluation. So by the name you can understand it's all about number, right? So imagine we are diving into the world of numbers, measurement, and anything that can be counted or measured, right? It's all about when you take a multiple choice quiz, there's a right answer, and it's all about matching what you have learned to specific questions, right? Think of it as playing a video game where you're trying to hit a high score based on specific goals or achievement. So this approach is super handy because it gives us a clear black and white picture of what's going on. For instance, in a classroom setting, a teacher might use a quiz to see how well students understand a math concept. So the results are easy to see and compare because they are all about numbers and facts. And real life example is like imagine you're learning to drive. So the quantitative part comes in when you take a written test to get your license. Then the test might ask, what does a red traffic light mean? right? And you'll pick the correct answer from a list. Your score is a clear indicator of your knowledge about the rules of the road, right? Then we have qualitative evaluation, right? So now flipping the script to qualitative evaluation. So this is where things get a bit more personal and subjective, right? It's not just about the cold hard facts, it's about understanding the deeper story, feelings and experiences behind those facts. If quantitative is a multiple choice test, then qualitative is like writing an essay or telling a story about your summer vacation. It's about the quality and depth of your experience or understanding, right? So this method is like being a detective in a drama series, right, where you pay attention to the nuances of a case, not just the obvious clues, right? For example, teachers might use essays or discussions to get a feel how deeply students understand a novel's themes beyond just recalling the plot. So a real life example here could be, if you're trying to improve your cooking skills, instead of just following a recipe, which is like quantitative, did you use the right amount of ingredients, or you taste as you cook and adjust based on what feels right for you, right? So that is qualitative, right? So in school, qualitative evaluation might look like observing a student's behavior over time or collecting detailed case studies to understand an individual's learning journey. It's all about the story and the journey, right, rather than just the destination. Now let me tell you about the placement evaluation. So imagine you're diving into a new video game. Before you even start, the game wants you to know if you're newbie or have been around for gaming for a quite a long time, right? So that's what a placement evaluation is like, right? So it's a way for schools to figure out what you already know and how they can teach you best, right? So picture this, you're about to start college and there is this test to see if you're ready for the basic math class or if you can jump straight to the more brain busting algebra stuff, right? So this isn't about grading you, it's more like setting the stage so you can shine, right? Teachers use these evaluations to tailor their lessons just for you, ensuring you're not snoozing through stuff you already know or freaking out over content that's way over your head, right? Now let me tell you about the case study evaluation. Right, so the case studies are like these detective shows where you have to piece together the clues, right? Except here, the mystery is a business problem, right? Or medical case or a social issue waiting to be solved. You might get a story about a company facing a major decision or a community trying to improve its school, right? Your job is what? Dive in, analyze the situation and come up with solution. So often discussing your findings with classmates or kind of jotting them down. It's a chance to play Sherlock Holmes in your field of study, right? Applying what you have learned to real life puzzles, right? So these are different types of case studies, right? Some focus on one specific scenario which is intrinsic, right? And while others use multiple example to make a point which is instrumental or to explore a broader trend which is collective, right? And now let me tell you about the survey research. So ever fill out a survey asking about your favorite ice cream flavor or how you felt about a recent purchase, right? And especially on Amazon. So that's survey research in a nutshell. But in the academic world, it digs into more serious stuff like how satisfied you are with your classes or how much you have learned over the semester. It's a way for schools to get the kind of, what's working and what's not straight from the your mouth, right? So these surveys can be as simple as Google form and they help educators see the bigger picture, making sure they're delivering the goods when it comes to your education. Then we have another statistical analysis. Again, it's all about the numbers and all this stuff, right? Now let me move on to important one, which is continuous and comprehensive evaluation system, which is in simple CCE, right? So back in 2009, something pretty cool happened in India regarding schools, right? So the Right to Education Act decided it was time to shake things up with how students are evaluated. So they brought in this idea called continuous and comprehensive evaluation, right? Or CCE for short. It's kind of like taking a closer look at how students do in school, but in a way that doesn't make them want to pull their hair out, right? So imagine this. Instead of waiting for a big, scary final exam to show what you have learned, you get checked on the go, right? This was especially, for the kids in 6th to 10th standard, and even the 12th graders in some places, right? So the big deal here was to check out everything about a student's school life, not just the academic stuff but also other cool things they do like sports, arts, or how they interact with others, right? So this CCE is like a school's way of saying, hey, we see you, all of you, right? It's all about looking at how well you think, remember the stuff, learn new things, and even how well you listen in class, right? And the best part, it's done in the bits and pieces. So you're not just cramming a whole year's worth of learning the night before a big test, but this means less stress, no more nightmares about exam. It's like having a mini checkup rather than a full-blown exam, right? And let's break it down with a real life example, right? So imagine you're learning to play the guitar, and with CCE, instead of having one big performance at the end of the show, right, everything you have learned, you have a small performance throughout the years, right? So your teacher checks how you're doing, gives you tips, and helps you to improve step by step. It's a lot less stressful, right? Plus you got to see how you're getting better over time. So in CCE, instead of getting scores like 90 out of 100, you get grades, right? It feels a lot friendlier and less like you're being judged with number. So the main goal is to make sure students grow in all aspects while they are in school, not just academically. It's about making school a place where you can learn without feeling like you're under a microscope, right? So the CCE system also gives teachers a new way to approach teaching. They're not just there to throw information at you, they're there to guide you, see where you're struggling and help you get better, right? It's like having a coach who's with you at every step, making sure you're improving. And instead of just one final exam that decides your fate, the case of your NET, right? So CCE uses different types of tests throughout the year. There are formative tests, which are like quick check-ins to see how you are doing, and summative tests, which are a kind of bit bigger and cover more ground. This way you're being tested in a way that feels more natural and less like a sudden death match at the end of the year, right? So in a nutshell, CCE is about making school a place where learning is more about growing as a person and less about stressing over exams. It's a way to make sure that by the time you leave school, you're not just smart book wise, but also ready to take on the world in all sorts of ways, right? Now let me tell you about the Cumulative Grade Points Average, in simple, CGPA, right? And what are these? So when you binge watch a series and each episode has its own rating, imagine if someone asked, what's the overall vibe of the series? You'd probably think about all the episodes you have watched and give an average rating, right? So that's CGPA, right? It's like a snapshot of how you're doing in your Bachelor of Engineering program, considering all the courses you have taken toward your degree. And if you're juggling a minor along with your major, it keeps track of that too, right? It's like your academic report card that sticks with you throughout college, right? Showing if you're more of a straight A student or if you have had your ups and downs, right? Now next we have CBSE, like Central Board of Secondary Education. Imagine if there was a single organization that decided what everyone studied in high schools across an entire country. That's what the Central Board of Education is for India, right? Picture it as the big umbrella organization set up a way back in 1929 with the idea of making sure schools across different states are on the same page, right, when it comes to what kids are learning. So every March, there's this one behind the big final exam for 10th and 12th graders, right? It's like having a giant school principal for the whole country. Next, we have National Testing Agency, NTA, which is actually conducting your NET exam, right? So, think of it as the gatekeeper for getting into college. Started in 2017. So this government agency is all about organizing those big nerve-wracking entrance exam for university like NET, JEE main, right, NEET, all these exams, right? Then we have CBSE, right? And what is that? Choice based credit system, right? And imagine going to a restaurant and being able to pick your starter, main course, and dessert from a whole range of options. So the CBCS lets a student customize their course menu, right? You're not just stuck with main course, but you can spice up your academic life with some elective or even some skill based courses to learn new things, right? It's a way to make sure what you're studying is really what you're interested in. Next, we have computer based testing, which is CBT, what you do in your NET exam, right? So there is this front of, you are in front of computer and just doing the exam. So this is kind of electronic digital online assessment or just computer test, is pretty much what it sounds like, right? So imagine you're going to a test, but instead of the classic paper and pencil, you're handed over to a computer. You find your seat, which is marked just for you, kind of like finding your desk in a classroom, but here's it's a computer terminal, right? Pop in your roll number and admit card information, and then you are in, right? Before you dive into the question, the computer gives you the lowdown on how everything is going to happen, right? And one of the coolest part about CBT is how they streamline the whole testing process, right? No more waiting weeks to find out how you did it. These tests can give you a result way faster, right? Plus they are super flexible. Say you need a test that fits your learning style better, right? So CBT can adapt, offering personalized question that challenge you're just right, and they also make it easier for teachers to see where you're shining and or need a bit more polish, right? So that is your CBT. Then we have content based instruction, right? Think of it as learning a new language by diving headfirst into interesting topic instead of just memorizing grammar rules and vocabulary, right? From day one, you're encouraged to actually use the new language to chat about real stuff, which is game changer for remembering what you have learned, right? So let me paint a picture for you. Imagine you're learning French, right? And instead of just repeating phrases about where the library is, you're discussing French cuisine, right? Or the history behind the Eiffel Tower, or even French cinema or French literature, right? This approach makes the learning process way more engaging because you're learning the language by connecting with subject that you're interested in, right? So both CBT and CBI are about making, learning and testing fit more naturally into how we think and interact with the world. So with CBT, it's all about using technology, right, to make tests less of a headache and more in tune with how we live our digital lives, right? And with CBI, it's about breaking down the barriers to language learning by making it about real communication, right? Not just textbook exercises. All right, let's dive into the world of test, but in a way that feels more like a chat over coffee than a lecture, right? So imagine you're trying to figure out where you stand on a new video game or a hobby that you have just picked up. That's where these tests come into play, but in the educational world. First, we have diagnostic test. Picture this as the what's my starting point, right? So before you embark on a learning journey, this test is like opening a map to see where you are. Let's say you're trying to learn to play the guitar. So a diagnostic test would figure out if you know your chords yet or if you're still figuring out how to hold the all these strings, right? It's super helpful for teachers to get the lay of the land, understanding what you already know and where you might need some help. It's like a personal guide for them to tailor their teaching just for you, because in exam they have asked question based on that. So remember, it's a pre-assessment for strength and weakness, right? And that also guides lesson planning and curriculum, right? So it diagnoses a student's learning difficulties, right? Because in exam they have asked question based on that. So then we have like placement tests. These are the where do I fit in, right, kind of test. Imagine you're joining a sports league. A placement test would determine whether you're starting in just beginners group or if you've got some skills to play with the advanced folk, right? So in language learning, it's about figuring out whether you are a newbie or a kind of know how your way around or pretty much fluent. So this ensures, right, you're learning with folks who are at the same level as you are, right, making it easier and more fun for everyone. Then we have prognostic test that we already talked about, right? Prognostic evaluation, right? So think of it as the crystal ball test. It's all about predicting the future, right? Based on what you have shown, you can do and learn. It guesses where you might end up. It's like when you're playing a video game and the game predicts you'll do well in strategy, but maybe not so, good at speed, right? So this test help is planning your learning journey. So you're set up for success, focusing on what you're good at and improving where you need, right? So that is all about prognostic test. Let me tell you about the aptitude test. So this is kind of, what's my potential, right? And it's not just about where you are now, but where you could go with the right training and education. Picture you're thinking about picking up photography, right? An aptitude test would help figure out if you have got an eye for composition or if your skills lie more in the technical side of things like working with camera settings. It's all about spotting your potential to excel in certain areas, guiding you toward where you might shine the brightest, right? So this also assess like numerical, logical and verbal skills, right? All the aptitude, even in our paper one we have like teaching aptitude, all these aptitude tests, right? So that is quite important, right? Next we have progress and achievement test. And what are these, right? Like how far have I come, right? So they measure what you have learned and how well you have grasped the course material. Say you're learning to cook. After a few lessons on baking, a progress test would check if you can now whip up the perfect cake, right? So these tests can be short term, like after a single cooking class, or a long term, checking in after a series of classes to see how much you have improved. It's a great way to see your growth over time and celebrate the milestone along the way. Next, we have proficiency test. So, when you're learning a new language and you want to prove how good you have got, that's where proficiency tests come into play. They are like your language learning milestone markers, right? Think of them as the big leagues for language learners, right? Exams like TOEFL and IELTS, right? If you're dreaming of studying in places where English is the go-to language, then acing these tests is your golden ticket, right? Imagine you have been binge watching British and American shows to get your English on point, and now you want to show off what you have actually understand and a kind of know all ABCD all kind of stuff, right? And then we have performance tests. So this is where things get real, right? It's not just about what you know, it's about showing what you can do with what you know, right? Picture yourself in a science class cooking up experiments, or in a drama nailing that monologue, right? That's the performance test, right? It's about doing the thing and doing it well, whether it's turning in a killer project or showcasing your skills in work simulation, right? So there is this vibe of show me what you have got, right? Like when you're asked to lead a team project at work to see how you manage under pressure, right? So you have got the typical day-to-day stuff, that's your typical performance, right? But then there are some moments when you're asked to go above and beyond. That's your maximum performance where you can just pull out all the stops, right? Then we have internal and external tests, right? And what are these? Internal tests are like those final exam your teacher gives, right? So if you have been paying attention all the semester or not, so they are the homegrown variety tailored to your course. External tests, on the other hand, are the big name exams set up by folks outside your school or workplace. We're talking about these GRE exam or TOEFL exam or IELTS exam, right? And then we have objective test, right? So imagine a quiz where there is no beating around the bush, right? So there is a right answer and there is a wrong one, right? Like those multiple choice questions that you do in your net, right? Then we have subjective test. So here's where things get a bit more personal, right? So these are a kind of essays question type, right? And these are sometimes interviews where it's not just about what you say but how you say it. It's like writing a heartfelt letter to your, making your case in a debate, or the person checking your work has to decide if you have hit the mark based on that judgment. It's more about your style, your reasoning, and how you express your thoughts, right? Then we have combination tests, and these tests are quite important. Remember, have you ever had a test that felt like a bit of everything? That's what kind of, combo tests are like. Take the TOEFL IBT for example. You have got parts where it's clear cut right or wrong answers like objective, and parts where you gotta flex your persuasive muscles in writing. So in TOEFL exam we have objective types, and also we have like subjective types, like we have to write it or write the essays, right? So in a nutshell, tests come in all shapes and sizes, right? Each with its own flavor and purpose. Whether you're taking the right answer, crafting an essay, or showing off your skills, each test is a step toward proving yourself and unlocking new opportunity. It's all about finding your strength and playing to them, right? Whether you're aiming for a university spot or a dream job, or just looking to level up your skills. So guys, that's all. Congratulations that we have finished our unit first, which is teaching aptitude, and I hope you understand well because we have discussed them in depth, right? So in our next session we're going to talk about research aptitude. So thank you so much and have a good day. Bye bye.